working to transform, I love that word, transform Australian homes for climate and energy resilience. And we do this by providing education. We provide education to households, energy consumers and communities through our events, programs and publications. Of course, you'll be familiar with Sustainable House Day, right? Yeah, lots of that, that's good. And the publications that we've got for sale here, Renew and also Sanctuary, which is my favourite. It comes in my letterbox every couple of months and it's just such a treat of great design advice. Very nicely exhibited there, Herb, thank you. We also publish expert independent information and resources. We undertake research, providing foundations for policy, and then we get in there and argue for the policy. We're doing a lot of advocacy and that sort of thing as well, and it has, through the collective voices of so many, contributed to policy changes. We've seen that in government and elsewhere. So we've got over 40 years of experience and thousands of members across Australia. I spread this too much. The tone is a little bit cheerleading, isn't it? But you're just encouraged to check out the QR code and sign up if you're interested in understanding more about the organisation or indeed becoming a member yourselves. But tonight, of course, we have an event for folks who are interested in the process of installing solar panels on an apartment building. And the conversations have been, well, that's a bit tricky, isn't it? There's a lot of challenges in that. Well, we've got an expert panel, including somebody who's navigating it themselves right now. So the process includes the apartment owner discussions on getting a little bit of intel into the voting process that Val's had to undergo, torturous negotiations, individual halls, secret squirrel meetings, all this sort of stuff. It's all fantastic. And so there's applying for a grant, selecting an installer and choosing a method for sharing solar power between the residents. You're pretty happy in it together, don't you, in some sense? And there's been a negotiation, conflict resolution, all that kind of thing. So we've got three knowledgeable speakers to share their experience and answer questions. And I've been briefing people, it's always quite lively, the questions, so I hope you're not going to disappoint on that front. And I need to direct the traffic, sorry, and eventually call things to a close, and I hope that doesn't happen too soon. So we've got Dan Thompson here from Smarter Communities. He has over 20 years experience in the energy sector, a strong technical background and education in electrical engineering, which is your hero. Has enabled Dan to successfully deliver rooftop solar power solutions for many groups. He will outline several common options. And Smarter Communities is one of the largest community management organisations in Australia, specialising in owners corporation management. I think I got that wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
William Anstee. Is that Anstee?
It is.
Yeah.
It is not really good to right. So.
From Loom Energy, is passionate about making solar power accessible to residents in multi-tenancy residencies. Loom Energy supplies the world first Australian-made SolShare trademark technology, which shares the electricity generated from a rooftop solar array between multiple dwellings. It's just the thing we need, isn't it? So Dr. Valerie Kay as well, welcome. She'll be joining us up the front in a moment, has hands-on experience with this topic. Back in 2014, Val arranged for a 1.5 kilowatt array to be installed on the roof of her apartment building. She's now working with fellow owners to apply for a Victorian Solar for Apartments grant based on a plan for individual panels for each apartment. And Val will provide valuable insights from an apartment owner's perspective, so it won't be fun. All right, well, thank you all for coming, and please join me in welcoming us.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Dan. I work for a company called Smarter Communities. We're a sustainability focused strata company. We're the second largest one here in Australia. So we look after 4,500 buildings. Now, my position in the company, I manage and head up the sustainability department. So what this means is that if we've got any committees that we look after, they've got any sustainable sort of projects that they want to work to, they can kind of reach out to us and we can help them effectively take like a concept and then work it all the way through. So hopefully we get some sort of renewable asset deployed at the end. So look, I've been just asked to come today to talk about one of the things that we do. And one of the products that we offer is community solar systems. So yeah, we've touched on this already. This is this concept where there's one system on the roof and then all of the residents connect into that. And this is why I've got my friend from Loom here. So it's just a quick agenda what we're going to cover today. So we're going to start off with what I'm going to class as the slightly more boring stuff, which is the strata piece. Now, The strata piece is very, very important that we get it right. This is where all the rules and the regs are, but it's not as exciting as the next bit, which is the technology that we're going to use to actually make this thing happen. That's where I pass over to Will. He's got the exciting bit. So yeah, we'll knock off my bit first, get that done, then on to him. Then we're going to quickly talk about the funding. So there's all the cash sloshing around at the moment for solar in apartments. So we'll talk about that. Then we've got some case studies that we'll quickly go through before we go on to some of the financial benefits. And then I think we'll pass over to Val, and then we'll do a lovely Q&A at the end. So yes, I'm a National Manager of Sustainability. Will, Housing Partnership Manager for Illume Energy. We'll come on to a little bit more about what you do in a minute. So a little bit about us. Like you might be able to tell from my accent, but I moved over from England about 8 years ago. I was company director for a high power manufacturing company back there. And once I moved here, there wasn't a huge amount of manufacturing going on, so I transitioned into the renewable energy space. When I was putting this slide together, I was looking for some photos of my family. So there's a picture of me and my son, the dogs. I've been married for 10 years, so I don't have quite so many photos of my wife, strangely enough, on my phone. They're kind of one of those things that happens when you get married. Take lots of pictures of your son and your dog, but not so many of your wife. So yeah, sorry Maz, hope she's not going to catch this one. Anyway.
You're being recorded.
There won't be at work tomorrow.
No.
Yeah, so for those that don't know me, Will Anstee, had basically a bit of a science background, always been passionate about, I guess, making a good impact on the earth. My sort of background before working with Illume, I used to project manage commercial solar system installs, which included SoulShare back in South Australia. So I got to come across to work for Illume. So as part of that, I work basically throughout, I guess, all the stakeholders that are involved. So we work directly with policymakers, state, federal government, trying to facilitate making it easier to get solar on apartments and making that big impact to not only owners but also renters in those environments. As you can see here, this is actually another dog now as well. This is a dog and cat. Very much, I'm just up in Preston myself. So it has been really nice to see, I guess, be a part of, working with Melbourne with the Solar for Apartments program kicking off, and being a part of all the apartments locally as well.
All right.
So when we sort of do these events, and Dan and I do these quite often, it's always nice to get a bit of, I guess, audience engagement. So whether you're in an apartment yourself or not, it could be a balance, could be investors, could be just those that are interested in the space. We like to do a bit of a raise of hands round table in a way. So our first poll, which solar benefits most appeal to you? It's always good to get that example and see what the crowd's looking at and sort of tailor what we speak about in a higher degree. So for those, love to get everyone's hands up as to one of these 5. So we've got reduce energy bills, increase the value of a property, reduce carbon emissions, future-proofing electrification, potentially getting EVs in the future, or the impact of solar for energy independence, reduce reliance on big energy retailers. So out of those lists, and a lot of them might be right, but anyone with A as the key one, so reducing energy bills, who would see that as the biggest one? Nice couple of hands. Always comes down to finances, we find, one of the big things. What about B, increasing the value of the property? Quite often a secondary benefit, but very important, which is very important as well. Reducing carbon emissions. Like to see, a little bit more passionate, which is great. Then we've got D, future-proofing for electrification. And obviously a lot of these, a lot of people may love them all. And then energy independence, being able to just reduce your reliance on the network rather than having to be at the hands of the big energy retailers. Thank you guys for taking part. Back to you, Dan.
All right, strata. Now, this slide here really kind of explains what we're doing here tonight. Australia is very, very good at screwing solar panels onto standalone homes. About 25% of Australians have got access to solar in their homes. We are the best in the world at doing it. Very, very good. Very, very impressive. The little graph underneath though, this is the problem that when we're dealing with strata buildings. Only 2% of the population that is in strata has access to solar. And this is what we're trying to change and turn around. So where does smarter communities fit in? So we're a sustainable focused strata company. So this is one of our interests. We want to make the buildings that we look after green and more efficient. Now, We the parent company of a number of brands. So down here in Vic, we've got a company called VBCS. So what we feel this does for us is it gives us this local understanding and knowledge of the local market, but we've got the funds to have a centralised teams like mine to help all of the buildings that we look after. Now, the services we offer, we're here to talk about community solar and government funding, but we also look at things like common area solar, EV charging, upgrading your main switchboard, embedded network tenders for some of the larger buildings that we look after, and then we also consult as well. So like if you're doing a sustainable project which doesn't fit nicely into one of those buckets, we can also help with that. So, navigating strata. Whenever we're dealing with sort of sustainable projects in strata, there's three key areas that need to be kind of covered. First is the technical piece. So this is where me and my team would come in. We have to explain to people, owners, committees, in layman's terms, what it is we're trying to do. Without that, without getting people on board, without getting owners to engage with us, this project's going nowhere. We've then got to get this thing through the strata process. Now, strata is a very defined set of rules. They're different from state to state, which makes it a little bit harder for us, but you don't need to worry about that too much. But we have to make sure we follow the rules, and we follow the rules correctly, because everything is recorded and documented, and if it's not done right, the project will be stopped. And then finally, we've got to finance this thing. So we're going to talk about government funding, which really helps, takes a big chunk out of the cost of this stuff. But we've still got to fund the balance. So how are we going to do that? We're going to get a strata loan. Are we going to do special levies, which effectively means we're asking owners to put their hands in their pocket and cough up $3,000 or whatever to pay for the solar? Or is there a maintenance budget that we might be able to use? So the key considerations that we've got to think about when we're managing these projects. First of all, stakeholder benefits. With community solar, the benefit goes back into the people who live there. Now that is great for owner-occupiers. That is great for tenants as well. For investors, where's the benefit for those guys? Unfortunately, Will can talk about that later on. Then we've got to think about the strata process. As soon as you start altering common area in a building, we need a special resolution in Victoria. So once we start wanting to screw solar panels onto the roof, we need a special resolution. That means we need at least 75% to vote in favour of the solar project. That's quite a high number. That's quite hard to get. We do have a little bit of a backup, something called an interim resolution. So if it doesn't pass at 75%, but we get 50% in favour, as long as we don't get 25% voting against, we can pass it as an interim. I think that's something that Val might talk about in a bit as well. But still, 50% is a lot higher turnout than you quite often get for your annual AGM. Like sometimes we're getting 10, 20% turning up for the AGM. So how do we get these people motivated for something like this? So owner engagement, the next point. This is what we've got to do. We've got to not only just sell this solution and sell what we're doing, sell the benefits to all of the committees, we've got to sell it to all of the owners, whether owner-occupiers or investors. It's a slightly different sell to each one. But we're effectively having to do a little sales job here to get this thing across the line. Funding solutions. Now, funding is very interesting because in strata, you've effectively got a complete cross-section of society living in an apartment building. You've got people at the back end of their financial earnings where finding $3,000, that's okay. Got that just squirreled away in the bank. But you've got first-time buyers where the idea that they might have $3,000 sitting in their bank account is completely ridiculous. And it's this negotiation, this process that we have to manage as strata companies, and Loom as well in some way, shape or form, is how we kind of pull this together so everyone's on the same hymn sheet. Final two things is electrical infrastructure and roof ownership. This is kind of how the building is set up. So quite often with older buildings, the buildings that we're trying to target with this funding and these solutions, we need to do some work on the main switchboard. They're not up to scratch. They might be made with asbestos or wood, or they are too small. They've got old meters in them. Not so much in Vic anymore, but there's lots of stuff to do, and that can cost somewhere between $25,000 to fix that. So it's another cost that we have to think about, and it's another cost that we have to build into the overall package. And then finally, roof ownership. In the majority of strata buildings, you don't actually own the roof that's above your apartment. It's a common area asset, so it's the owner's corporation that owns that. And there's two ways you can solve this. One, Val's got one. She lives in an apartment with just a ground floor and a first floor. And what they're going to do is they're going to chop up the roof so everyone gets the equal amount of roof space. and they'll put their little solar panels on that. But there's a space restriction there. There's only a certain amount of panels they're going to be able to squeeze onto that. And that doesn't work when you've got another layer or another layer, because suddenly you haven't got enough space for everyone to have enough for their own little solar system. So this is when we come on to the technical solution, which is a loop.
Yeah. So we'll cover off and kick off with a little bit of a neat soul share piece. I think it's just always good to stress that Loom as a company who provides soul share and brought soul share to market. We popped in to market around 2015, so we came out of University of Melbourne as a startup, so 9 years ago now, and now we've graduated into a multinational company based out of Richmond, which is where our head office is and where I am. And we do manufacture locally. Was Box Hill, it's now down in Dandenong. So just to give some feedback on that, but basically we're not installers, we help with the consultation, we're a manufacturer. We consult with all the stakeholders involved to facilitate, education mainly with owners corporations, working very closely with strata management companies, and then also working with those installers to facilitate, getting the right option that's available for owners corps. So we've got over, it's now over 3,000 apartments as well. I need to let Dan
I need to update my slides.
So that's my bad. But we've got a couple of these sites here, centre one at the top and bottom left are in Melbourne, actually at the bottom right. So a few apartment buildings with soul share installed. But the key thing from an infographic point of view to share a bit how a Loom, the soul share box works. What we've got here is just a numbered infographic. So the example we've got here is a 15 apartment building. As you can see, there's 15 electricity meters there. So there's a commonly owned rooftop. So what we have here is one commonly owned group of panels for the owner's corporation or the apartment building. Now that powers and goes down to an inverter. Now of course an inverter is always required when utilising solar to convert that solar energy, which is DC power, into AC power that can be consumed within the building. Now, my favourite part of this is number 3, of course, which is the soul share box. I sort of refer to it as a fancy solar splitter. So basically you have one input going in from a shared system, and then we split that solar up into up to 15 connections per box. So it is modular, so depending on how many apartments you do have. So in this case, we'd have one cable going in, and then we'd have a direct solar supply provided to every single apartment. Now, it is connected centrally, so it is connected at wherever your co-located meter board is, and it just means you then get behind the meter solar. So just like standalone home solar, in a standalone home, basically you get a free source of energy from the solar, and then any extra energy you need you buy from the grid, whoever your electricity retailer is, you have freedom of choice, and then any excess solar from the amount of solar you get given, you sell back to your energy retailer for a feed-in tariff. Now, what the beautiful part of, shared solar is if we've got 15, say, apartments here, at any one point in time, an individual is not limited to 1/15 of all power being generated. So in a situation like this, say, Unit 1 could be accessing up to 33% of the entire system on the rooftop. So let's say we have, let's say, to keep it simple, we'll say 15 kilowatts of solar. So in this scenario, we've got 15 kilowatts of solar, 15 apartments shared system. Although on average, each apartment will get 1 kilowatt worth of solar, instantaneously you can access up to 5 kilowatts at any one point in time. So as we know with solar, there is a bit of export back to the network. So it's really about finding, we work off demand management. So, and I'll have a little bit of a graph on the next slide here to point that out a little bit too. Well, no, we won't. No, it's further, I think. So, with that, just to give a little bit of an analogy, the big thing as well is ensuring that people receive the amount of solar that they're entitled to. So, in an owner's corporation with 15 apartments, each individual would own 1/15 of the system. So it's a shared system, but they own 1/15. Now, soul share, although you can access up to a third of the system at any one point in time, what it ensures is per calendar month, each and every individual within that building receives the ownership of solar that they get. So an example I like to give is if we have 15 apartments, let's say we have 15 empty glasses of water. Now, water and energy is a sort of interrelated analogy here. Obviously don't mix them. So with that, throughout the month, as you get thirsty for energy or water, SoulShare's role is to fill up your cup when you're thirsty. Now, what it ensures at the end of the month is everyone's cup is completely full. So it ensures that no really thirsty or power hungry apartment can consume more of the energy than what they're entitled to. Now, the contrast of that is if someone in the building is at home for the entire month, they still own 1/15 of the system, so they still need to receive that solar. So SoulShare would provide that solar to them, when no one else is using energy. So they still get that feed-in tariff in the same way that a standalone home system would there as well. Probably cover a bit more in the Q&As, but our website has a lot more info as well, and we can obviously support with that. Thank you there.
Thanks. All right, so Victoria funding. We've had round 1, it was earlier this year, that closed. But the good news is round 2 is going to come along in a couple of weeks' time, end of August. The way the grant works is it is $2,800 per lot. Now, I understand there's a lot of smart people in this room. So, if you've got a building with 10 lots on, how many thousands of dollars do you get given by the government? It's 28,000, just to help you there. It's a lot of cash. This is a lot of cash. We do not think this is going to be coming round again. So look, this is the time to be going for it. The money is there and it is available. It was just for 5,000 lots. We don't know quite yet in round 2 how many more that's going to be expanded to, but it is designed for buildings between 5 and 50 lots. Now, not all buildings are covered, so things like townhouses are being excluded. If your building is completely commercial, that's excluded. If it's got an embedded network, it's out of the picture as well. So there are some rules as well that we've got to think about. Now, Smarter Communities, for round 1, we were successful in applying for $2.5 million worth of funding. So this funding is easy, I was about to say it's easy to get. I mean, it's not that difficult to get. And that's helped over 75 buildings that we manage. Equivalent to 1,500 kilowatts of solar. So, financial benefits. Right, let me pass it to Will.
Yes, kick off a quick poll. So, me personally, I think energy bills went up 12 months ago by about 50%. I was in Power Shop. It was a bit of an interesting, scary thing. But sort of the key part of this is just to verbalise or sort of vocalise the impact of energy bills going up. So would love to see a show of hands as I go through here, sort of how much your energy bills have gone up in the last period. We were very lucky in Victoria for quite a few years to sit around the 20 cent mark. That changed about 12 months ago. 20 cent mark, yep. So we're now usually around the 30 cent mark. But so for anyone's bill's gone up about 30% or more that they know of throughout that period. Yep, a few people. 20 and 30, that's usually pretty common. Definitely mitigated if you shop around and log on to the, I think it's Energy Made Easy website. Anyone less than 20, so a bit less. Yep. Anyone managed to keep the same rate for the last 12 months? No. Yeah, interesting. And then anyone that's not too sure as well. Yeah, perfect. So the big thing is that is, usually around 20 to 30% or more as an energy increase annually. We're hoping they stay pretty similar this year, but we did see such drastic jump last year. So it's good to verbalise that. My favourite slide. So this gives a little bit of an example of, I guess, traditional solar. So a standalone home or an individual system, if you want to put it that way, against that of a SoulShare. So the instance we have here is on the top. We have a 1.7 kilowatt individual system. So we've got about 4 kilowatts of, 4 panels on average. And with that, the green line shows you the peak amount of solar that can be provided throughout the day. Of course, it's the highest when the sun's highest in the sky, and as it gets to early morning or early evening, it dies off as there's less sun, so the panels can't make as much. Now, where the green line is above the navy blue line, that's where you're selling that energy back to the network at whatever your feed-in tariff is. If you can get 7 cents, it's probably a good thing. Usually it's a little bit less. But where that black line or navy blue line is above the green, that's where you're paying for energy from your electricity retailer. Of course, if you have solar, the idea is to minimise that. You want to get as much under that green line as possible. Now, the beautiful part of SoulShare is it is a little bit different because although the same amount of solar allocation is there per apartment, 1.7 kilowatts, you're not limited to 1.7 kilowatts. You're able to access a third of that system that's connected. So in this case, they could access individually they could potentially access up to 6.6 kilowatts for this site. And as you can see here, it's the same graph, same system, it's individual to soul share. And because of the soul share system, you can cover more than 1.7 kilowatts alone. So as you can see at the top, this individual apartment, and this is actually an apartment in Doncaster that we got the data from, they have access to over 4 kilowatts because of that shared system, and it's pulling from that overall system. The benefit of that as well is you're not exporting as much back to the network. So the proportion of solar that you're actually self-consuming is a lot higher. So instead of feeding back to the network at 7 cents, you're then preventing having to buy energy at 30 cents from your energy retailer. So every unit of that you can do, 7 cents to 30 cents, you're exporting 4 units of energy to offset the purchase of 1. So you really want to self-consume as much as possible, but can go into a bit more information or detail of that later. The biggest thing when it comes to strata as well is we look at, shared solar or solar in general. It's not just shared solar. Very similar to a pool, say in an apartment complex. Everyone gets to benefit from it, but everyone contributes to it, sort of the maintenance and the installation of that. So it's just a fun little picture to do a bit of a comparison for you.
Right, this is me as well.
So to give it sort of a bit of an insight in the cost of shared solar, it usually sits around the $3,000 to $5,000 cost per apartment installed. So that's full install scope costs from an end solar installer. So that usually sits at around 1.5 to 1.7 kilowatts of solar that's provided. Obviously with the $2,800 grant, we've got a lot of sites that are virtually $0 out of pocket, which has been really exciting to see. Depends on how many apartments and obviously the makeup of the building. And we'll go into this a little bit more, but the property valuation increase usually sits about 3 to 5 times that from the data we've seen. We've got some actual data later on, but we've also got a few people that have looked into that in a little bit more detail. Now, immediate energy bill savings annually, from day one you're saving money, usually sit around that 30% mark. What it equates to is basically all of your daytime energy usage. So if people then go, let's do our washing during the day, we've seen people with 60-70% reductions once you exclude the consideration of your daily supply charge. But mostly with our solar-based funding, the average project actually sits to a payback around 1 to 3 years. We've found at the moment, excluding the cost increase of any switchboard upgrades that might be required to get your buildings up to standard.
All right.
Exciting part.
A couple of case studies. So this is one of the first ones that we did here in Melbourne with the funding, 457 St Kilda Street. This is a lovely picture of the chairperson, along with Lily D'Ambrosio, that's how you say it, isn't it? The Energy Minister. So obviously she wanted to come and sell the funding, make sure that everyone heard about it. So they turned up outside this building with 5 camera crews. There's another MP there, Ryan Batchelor, not sure who he was. I think he was just there for the photo opportunity. And then my boss there on the right. I was supposed to be in this picture, but I was on holiday at the time, so someone else had to do it. But this is kind of the numbers of what we're talking about here. So in this one, 12 lots, 26 kilowatts, which is the maximum amount you can put into a single soul share. For this one, the building was built back in the 60s, so we had to do some work on the main switchboard. So that comes out. But let's not just focus on one project with the building. Let's think about how we can maximise the benefit here. We then put in a 3-phase connection point for future EV charging system as well. We don't want to have to upgrade a main switchboard for solar, and then 3 years' time, when a couple of people have got EVs and need to charge them, to pull that out and have to go again. So the cost for this project, circa 51 grand for the solar installation, 19 grand for the main switchboard upgrade work. The funding knocked off 33 grand. So on a per lot basis, if you're including the main switchboard work, that's about $3,000 out of pocket for everyone. And if you are not including the main switchboards, it's just under 1,500. And the important number here is to think that the soul share, on average, before you start changing your energy consumption habits, saves you about $500 per annum. So you can kind of see the payback period with that 3,000 or 1,500 number. Oh, wrong one.
This is just a little bit of data that we took as well for sites installed with SoulShare. So biggest thing we run into in apartment buildings is there is a ratio of renters within these buildings. In Victoria, it's roughly from memory around that 55-60% of Victoria are renters that live in apartments. So ends up being the majority. So I guess especially for those owner-occupiers committees that are communicating the benefits, it is really important that I guess the property value increase is communicated well. And it's also seen via Domain post a lot about this. They've got some updated figures. They say it's around roughly $90,000 to $100,000 value increase in a unit in Melbourne, which is a lot of money. We obviously are a lot more conservative with that, but these figures just show you the building increase in property value for sites with SoulShare installed against those that don't have SoulShare installed in that suburb. So if we look at the second one there, 59 Stable Circuit, that's the photo of the picture, that's in Doncaster. So it's taken the value increase of those apartments against the suburb average within Doncaster. We've never had a negative result, which is quite good. Obviously you have to market accordingly, but so poll number 3, and we sort of verbalise this as just a few things that we can sort of help out, either myself or Dan. So if there's any assistance that you guys need at any point in time, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to have a discussion. Obviously we love the space and getting good results for everyone. So with Dan, connect to the sustainability team, whether it's even just Strata or the sustainability offerings that they have. Learn more about Allume. So we have our websites. I do a lot of Q&As. There's a lot of council programs that we work really closely with. Materials to share with landlords. We can also help with that. We also do feasibility reports as well. So they're not quotes from a solar installer, but basically we have a quick look at your building and go, how much solar can you fit on your rooftop? What's the estimated cost of this and what your savings are likely to be? And then we can also introduce you to installers as well. But that's something that we do as a complimentary service in Victoria. And then of course quotes as well. So feel free to reach out to the team at all at any point in time if you ever want to something such as that.
Right, well, I think that's it from us. We're now going to hand over to Val, who's going to talk about a slightly different way of doing it, about the Allume solution.
Well, I can start talking, just say hello to everybody. It's great to see everyone. And before I start, I might as well just say I've been living off-grid on Kangaroo Island for the last month, and so I haven't had much time for my presentation. You've seen a lovely polished one from these two, so thank you for that. That was really interesting. And something a bit simpler, but hopefully it's got all the basic information. And of course I can answer any questions at the end. I'm happy to answer any questions. I was saying to everyone at the start that I should have started off with some photos of kangaroos. So I haven't actually got, they've had their dogs, but I haven't actually got the photos of the kangaroos, so you just have to imagine that. Okay, so yeah, this is a personal, unfortunately the picture there is in the background, but we'll see that again in a minute. The picture in the background is a picture of the apartment block that I live in, and this is my personal experience of first of all having solar panels installed 10 years ago, and now going through the process of applying for a grant to get solar panels for all the apartments in this block. It is I might just move on to the next. Oh, no. Oh, right, okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, now. So let me just have a look. It's not terrifically clear, the photo, is it? But hopefully you can get an impression of it. Yeah. So there's 10 units. It's built in the 1960s. It's small one-bedroom apartments. It's in does overlook a park and it has the north facing roof, so it is in a very good location for solar, although there are some very big trees which you can see, those big shapes there, and they are not much of a problem in summer when you're getting a lot of sun anyway, but in winter, particularly in those seasons of the year when the sun is a bit lower from the north, they do shade the roof a bit, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, and it's one of the factors in our new proposal. You can just see down in the corner, the far corner of the slide, you can hopefully make out those existing solar panels.
Mhm.
Those are the solar panels that I had installed back in 2013 actually. They were approved sort of in 2014. And yes, I think that's the main things to tell you about where it is and so on.
Just put your lines down near the microphone.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Now, I hope everyone can hear me now. Sorry if you couldn't hear me before. So my own experience is that I had a professional and personal interest in sustainability. I did a PhD on sustainability, equity and health, and also taught for several years at Monash in climate change and public health. So I had a good understanding of kind of big picture issues around climate change and sustainability, why we need to shift to renewables. But unlike the two speakers you've heard, I didn't have that detailed technical background, and I think that's actually quite a relevant thing to hear from that perspective of people who don't have that, because that is one of the barriers that many people face in trying to think about some of these issues. How do we go to solar? How do we go to this? They don't have that detailed technical background. But I had the interest in sustainability. I wanted to install the panels, and back then I was able to get permission from the Owners Corporation, or the body corporate as it was called in those days, to install panels. They allowed me to use 10% of the north facing roof, which is the panels that you saw in the previous picture. You could just make out. Some of the things that probably enabled this is, first of all, that we have a slightly higher than usual proportion of owner-occupiers in our building. It's generally more around 60% or more over the years that I've been there. I knew most of them personally, so that is always helpful. I worked with the then Moreland Energy Foundation. I don't know if everybody knows about that, but it used to be a really useful organisation to help people who didn't have that detailed technical background to understand the system, to get information about it. So I was able to draw on them to help me in this process of looking for what kind of solar panels and what I needed to do, who were registered installers that I could use and so on, and then get the information to send out to all the owners and ask for their approval by a special resolution, which I was fortunate enough to be able to get then. So I had the panels installed, and I think, as I say there, the big enabling factor that in that situation was kind of personal trust, both from me knowing people and from the Moreland Energy Foundation being able to help me with reliable information. So, please feel free to stop me if I'm anything that's not clear. My system has worked well. It's a 1.5 kilowatt system, and it has worked well. For most of the year, I generate more power than I actually use, which of course doesn't necessarily mean, as we've just heard in the presentation, doesn't necessarily mean I can use it all up because of the time of day and all that. But the other thing I should note is that I and most of the people in the apartment block have we actually, all of us, we have a shared gas hot water service, and that's going to be really hard to change. I've already trying to get people to look at that, and that's going to be very difficult to change. So that's a shared one, but we also have individual gas cooking, and I think there's only about one apartment that's converted from that. So our bills are probably lower, our electricity bills are probably lower because of those reasons, obviously. I find it a bit hard to estimate how much I've saved because of the fact that the retail, actually I've been with Power Shop, I think, Will, you were saying, I've been with Power Shop for most of this process, but I think like all retailers, they're changing their price structure, and I think that does make it a bit hard to estimate how much you've saved. I can see from my bills that I'm not using, I can see when I'm not using so much, so obviously there are savings, but as to exactly how much, that's a bit difficult to estimate because of the fact that the the supply to your house charge keeps going up and you're using less, but you're paying more to actually have the supply when you're on the grid. How obviously I have saved, and also obviously I've certainly reduced emissions, I know that, and that's an important thing to me. I'm continuing to introduce sustainability measures into my apartment, for example, reverse cycle air conditioning, double glazing, and more prosaic things like trying to block up the gaps. And Chris, who is somewhere around here, from young Chris told us in our group that we run that looks at some of these issues about the things that you can borrow from the library that tell you where the gaps in your walls and so on are. So I've been trying to block up some of those. So there's a range of things I'm doing, and again, that changes the calculation about the savings because I'm doing other things that will reduce the amount of energy I'm using at the same time. So it's hard to calculate just how much the solar has saved, although obviously it has saved quite a bit. With the solar system, I did hope, and it seemed for a while as if people might follow my example and put their individual solar panels up, but no one else has done. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through about some of the possible reasons. So when the solar for apartments grants became available, because of the experience I'd had, I was able to lead the process of applying. I'm on the Owners Corporation Committee, and I was able to work with my fellow committee members to look into this process, what we need to do. Clearly not everyone's going to be in that position, and there are organisations like Smarter Communities to help, and especially with the bigger blocks, I think that's very relevant. But with a small group like us, where most of the people know each other, it was possible for us to work through a lot of this. But the first 4 quotes we got from installers involved quite considerable out-of-pocket costs. And because the nature of our block, being small apartments, older apartments, I mean, it's a lovely setting, but it's not expensive, and people aren't all high income. Some people are on quite limited incomes. So as soon as we started talking about out-of-pocket costs, even $1,000 or something, then we had people saying, well, I don't think I can do that. They've got more immediate needs for their money and they don't want out-of-pocket costs. And so also most of them were in favour of solar in principle, but they weren't all entirely convinced of the benefits, particularly the financial benefits. And that is, obviously quite complicated. And then at Sustainable House Day, I heard about TCK Solar, and there's a representative, Dan Cameron from TCK Solar, in the audience here. So I'll tell you a bit about why we went with them, but Dan can fill you in later on all the information, especially if I get any of it not quite right or anything. So TCK Solar is a local company that had provided an approach which was tailored to the apartment blocks like ours, where one of the considerations is definitely that not everyone can afford the out-of-pocket costs for some of the other systems. So now, how's that picture? That is the picture from, sorry, I'm going away from the mic again, but it's still not terrifically good quality, I'm sorry, but you can probably see this is the mock-up from TCK Solar with their quote. And what we worked out, if my system is taken off, which I will do for this purpose, and hopefully it will be reused because it still seems to be working perfectly well, that we can get of these 2 each so up to 40 panels on the roof, on the north-facing roof. And so what the proposal is that of those, 20 of the panels can be provided, so that's 2 each per apartment, can be provided within the 2,800 that Dan has already mentioned. So that can cover the whole costs of those for people who just can't manage any other. Of course, the out-of-pocket costs, I should say, will not go directly in the first instance, will not go directly to the owners. It would be the Owners Corporation that would have to raise a levy. But unfortunately, another thing is that we've already had to just raise our general levies too. So putting another levy on people for the cost of this would have been very unpopular too. So what it would do is that 2 panels, which is almost 1 kilowatt system, can be provided for the money that we get from the grant without having to raise a levy, without having to put any additional costs on owners. they can, and then owners who want more can opt to have up to 2 more panels, or nearly 1 kilowatt, so they can have a nearly 2 kilowatt system at their own expense. So they can have, because it's a bit more efficient and so on, they can get actually a bit more than I've currently got, which is 1.5, so they can get up to almost 2. The system the proposed system will use microinverters, and again, Dan can explain about this, but one thing it will mean it will be less affected by the shading, because only the panels that are actually shaded will turn off rather than the whole system, which will help in these days when the sun's not directly overhead. And it will be connected to the individual apartment, so in that sense it's different from what Will's been talking about. It's connected directly into the individual apartments, and I think there's a lot of advantages in a shared system, but in our case with a small block like ours, an individual system can work too. So the great benefit of this system for us was the equity, the opportunity that it gives to everybody to have some solar power, and for those who can afford it at present to be able to get a bit more. And hopefully, there are a lot of schemes, no interest loans, council loans, anything to help people get sold. They might, at present, they are not usually available to apartment dwellers, which is a real problem. And we've discussed this with relevant people, and hopefully there will be measures to improve this. And in the future, if people can get a no interest loan or a council grant or something, they might be able to add additional panels too. I hope that might happen for those who can't afford them right now. We talked about, the applications are in now. The first stage of our application was successful. We were conditionally approved, and we had to have the ballot for the special resolution. We've had our ballot, it's just been concluded. 7 out of the 10 owners approved, but 3 didn't return the ballot. So we only technically got 70%. The funny part about this is that someone, naming no names, someone has confessed to me that they forgot about it and they were going to be a yes vote. So we would have got 80% and have been all fine. But as it is, we got 70%, no opposition, and we presumably will just have to wait a month until, as Dan explained, the interim special resolution becomes the special resolution. So all going well, we should complete our application by the 17th of September. We've had an extension to the 17th of September because of these delays, and then go ahead. I think it's an example of an inclusive approach that could be done by the committee with experience, but without necessarily specialised knowledge. So definitely having the experience of having had solar did help. There's no doubt about that, and not everybody is going to be in that position. One of the things that's interesting is that even though we can now offer this for no out-of-pocket cost to people, it is possible that some people will choose not to be in the system, and that raises some other questions about why people don't necessarily believe in or accept the benefits of solar systems. But I think those are bigger picture questions, which I'm happy to talk about, but they are a different thing. So I'm happy to go on with questions, and I hope I've covered everything that I'm supposed to. So I'll hand over to Lara. Thank you.
Yes, now folks, it is time for your questions. So I'm going to call on my team to run around with mics if we can. Yeah, you're very welcome. I think we might need to just grab at least one of those, and I've got one here. And so the first question. Is the measurement date, is it on?
No. Wait a sec for the green light to come on.
Green. I saw a fire. There you go.
Good.
Thank you. Is the figure that you've given up there, 1 kilowatt hour, is that a standard measurement that is equal by 2 panels? Is that the same?
1 kilowatt, sorry, it's just 1 kilowatt system. And
a 1 kilowatt system.
Perhaps it might be Dan Cameron from TCK.
Sure, I can answer that. So yeah, the 1 kilowatt system, that's made up of 2 485 watt panels. So combined, that's a 0.97 kilowatt system.
Yep.
Okay, I'm kind of in the early days of where you were with your buddy corporate. And we're trying to figure out, and we've got quotes, and I have no background whatsoever, and that's why I'm here. I'm trying to find out what is the best for our units. The system, the quotes that we've had vary from 39.9 kilowatts 84 panels to a 171.6 kilowatt system to 390 panels. And we've got about 4 or 5 others in between. How do we begin to evaluate what all that means? And we have gas hot water, and the ultimate idea is that we want to get rid of the gas hot water. And I gather that that's another whole issue. And then the term water pump has come up, and I have no clue as to whether that's involved with electrical, gas, water heaters, or what that even means. So it's quite a difficult thing for people who are not au fait with the understanding of how all this works. And I'm sure we'll need a new power board. But can you give us some tips on how to begin to evaluate the quotes you have and understand what they're even saying? Help.
Yeah, I can kick off there. I mean, I suppose that this is really what my team and my department does. Although I work for a startup firm, I'm like independent. I don't get a kickback from any solar installer or any provider. And the way that we like to operate is that we have recommended solar installers that we know and trust that can do a good job. We have an idea as well what the size should be. So, I mean, without knowing the amount of lots you've got and things like that, it's a bit difficult for me to say off the bat like how big the system should be. But we have a general idea of how big your system should be. But we're completely fine though with our buildings and committees going off finding their own quotes and then coming back, and then we can do a comparison. So yeah, that's kind of like a service that we would offer. I do know that we kind of pride ourselves for being, I think, the first and maybe the only strata company with a sustainability department. But there are other companies out there that will do the same sort of services as we provide. And I don't know, well, you'd probably know a few more of these. There would be direct competition to me, so I'm not 100% sure of them off the top of my head. But there will be independent bodies that will be able to kind of help you, navigate through that little process. The other two questions you've got are they are two other big problems. Trying to change over from gas to electric heat pumps is a real challenge. That is a whole nother conversation. I don't know where I would start with that here. It's probably best for us to park that and maybe you could ping me an email or something. I've got a couple of flyers down here with QR codes and stuff, so just take one, you can either email me your questions or you can scan them and then just put your details in and I can come back to you. What was the third question you're talking about? There was the third point.
Well, the water pumps, I'm not sure where they come in. Does that mean we use them with our current gas system?
Yeah, so I think what we're talking about here is kind of trying to change over from gas to all electric. It's more straightforward when you're living in a standalone home, but when you're dealing in apartments, quite often you find the person that owns that gas hot water plant is probably the hot water provider, and they have no real financial benefit to kind of change over to heat pumps because they're so much more expensive to install. But anyway, yeah, if you fire me an email on that, I'll be able to come back to you on a separate day for that.
I can comment a little bit on that particular question because we've got a shared gas hot water system in our apartments, and one of the tanks stopped working, and so I was particularly advocating that we look at a heat pump system, electric heat pump system, which is what you're talking about, I think. But basically, cost was the big factor. Again, so cost obviously is a big factor in our situation. People were not prepared to pay the extra, even though potentially they could save in the longer term. I mean, definitely I think they could save in the longer term. The other thing that was a bit of an issue was noise, because there is limited space to put it. And some people already have the reverse cycle air conditioning, which, correct me, but I think it works in a very similar way with the heat pump kind of system. And you can hear them sometimes at night. Some of the systems are quieter than others, but given that we had limited space, it was possible that one person might have heard the system at night, and she was very opposed to it. So in the end, those factors, we opted to do a repair, get a replacement tank, even though the other one might well break down. It's a putting off thing and maybe hoping we get an extra 10 years and can save up some more money. Because in the long term, I think, electric heat pump systems are the way that we want to go, but it is quite a big thing to do, so that's our experience.
If I can just add that a great source of information and advice is, of course, renew.org. And we run these sorts of events on heat pumps and so on. So, and some of the specialist providers who do that sort of consultation and installation and manage it sort of end to end, they of course advertise in our magazine, Sanctuary Renew. So I'd encourage you to check that out. Another question?
Oh, well, actually, can I add a little bit as well, just on the previous question? One of the big, obviously, any, I guess, owners corporation that does have a really good strata management company, obviously with Smarter Communities, they're very lucky. We do work with a lot of other stratas and strata management companies who aren't as privileged to have, I guess, access to that. So we do find that sort of, I guess, Dan and I probably play a very similar role in a lot of ways for a lot of owners corporations, I guess, navigating the special resolution piece, decision making, how to utilise the roof space. But one of the big things that we do have when it comes to quotes as well is, because we sit as a professional when it comes to shared solar, because we invented the tech, we basically, one of the things we do is ensure that, we might do a quote comparison session. So we might sit down with the owners committee, the strata manager, and go, what are the key things to look at within these quotes? Now, we personally, obviously, we sell a sole share to whoever's successful, the successful installer. But to us, it doesn't matter who it is, and we want to make sure that those end customers are delivered a product, where there's feedback given that meets their needs. So we don't tell any of them, say which installer to go with for the owners corporation. It's really about giving them the information to go, all right, what do I have to look at? Panels, inverters, are the two key ones, workmanship warranty, the install company as well as, even payment terms, milestone terms, and then, basically giving the knowledge to the owners committee to then make an informed decision of what's possible. And then, we advise on all different third-party consultancies as well. Obviously, they're generally costed, we're a free service, just because of the opportunity of the rebates. But, just finding the right people to go to. Local councils are great, but Renew is incredible. So, yeah.
First question, you can hand yours, Mike. Sorry, just.
Oh, beg your pardon?
But he can hand the mic on to you.
Right.
Just switch the thing up. Yeah.
Yeah, with regard to the TCK system, to achieve the no out-of-pocket costs, is that covered by the rebate system?
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much been our approach. So with a 10 apartment block, we create a 10 kilowatt system. So that's evenly shared amongst each apartment. So each apartment gets a 1 kilowatt system. And then if any individual unit wants to increase their system size, then they have the option of purchasing additional panels just to add on. So that generated electricity will just go to their apartment. So if unit 1 doesn't want to pay any money, that's fine, they don't have to. If unit 2 wants to get a 2 or a 3 kilowatt system, that's fine, they can just purchase the additional panels just for them. So that's how we approached it, exactly that, as Dr. Val was saying, being able to get that consensus from everybody and being inclusive to everyone in the apartment.
Thanks, and the TCK system has the same input tariff feedback as.
Yeah, so that's based on the distributor.
It wasn't mentioned in the presentation, so it just works. Does that work individually or collectively?
Yeah, so that works individually. So
Okay.
Each apartment has their allocation of panels and they go just to that unit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really finding it interesting. I'm not related to an apartment building. I'm just a homeowner with my own thing. I think I've got more panels than I have tiles on my roof, but bloody fantastic. One simple question. With my system as an individual, my output gets capped at 5 kilowatts, I think, going back into the grid. In your sort of system with apartments, do you have a cap of the maximum that can go back into the grid if you had let's say half the people in the apartment not drawing on electricity and lots going back in the middle of summer?
Yeah, definitely. So with the cap that you're, I guess, speaking of is associated with the size of the inverter.
Yep.
So usually you have more panels than, say, the size of the inverter. So what that means is where we have, say, a shared system, it is a much larger inverter that does have a cap.
Right.
but because we have up to 15 people working under that cap, and basically you've got a big pool of energy that's being pulled in multiple directions, you're not limited to, say, an individual cap per residency. You're sharing a much larger cap, so it's the equivalent of saying if you had 15, say, as the example I had was 1.7 kilowatt systems, everyone's not limited to 1.7, like how you're limited to, say, probably 5 potentially in your asset. Now, it is important to note that apartments use a lot less energy than standalone homes because they are, thermally associated, smaller footprint generally, and basically with what we do, for example, every resident has full access to see the amount of solar that is provided, so they can see on a 24-hour period how much solar they're receiving. But also an additional cost that usually comes with individual systems is seeing what you're actually self-consuming as well. So you both get the solar that you're having as well as a 24-hour energy demand profile as well. So it actually lets you, to the dollar mark, figure out how much money you've saved every day or every time period with your solar, where you're connected with shared solar. But it also means you can then figure out whether you're using, middle of the day, let's say, you're using all your appliances at one point in time and it's a spike above the solar. And you can look at your graph, which is just on a website, you have your own access, and you can sort of shift your loads a lot better. So you can better use that energy to get better self-consumption of that solar. So every resident has full access to that for the 30-year lifetime that these systems last, and beyond. But it is a key thing. Yeah, so the inverter limit is diluted when it comes to solar share.
A few questions, is everyone?
Yes.
So, in regards to the age of the switchboards at the EV upgrader, what's the time frame of that? Also, is the capacity as well with the systems to incorporate V2L or V2H to be able to then, utilise EVs, batteries back in the communal solar? Actually, we'll start with those questions here.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the main switchboard one. We tend to find that newer buildings, I say newer buildings, anywhere sort of like 20 years and less, we tend to find that the main switchboard issues are less. Once we start getting past 20 years, it's a bit of a luck of the draw, unfortunately. So yeah, and then obviously once you start getting to buildings which are sort of 30, 40 years old, then there are definitely issues. So yeah, the newer the board, or the newer the building, the less issues we have, and that's, yeah, I'd probably think 20 years is the number you want to be thinking about wherever you're living. With regards to putting vehicles back into it, I can talk around like batteries generally. When you're adding batteries into any solar system, it's good to get like 12 months usage data out of the system first to see how much is actually going back into the grid. And you'd normally size up your battery that way around. I'm not quite sure how vehicle to load would work in a loom system. Have you connected any that way around?
Vehicle to load. So we have, there's a site in New South Wales we've done where people just have their own Tesla chargers. So because we are behind the meter, basically SolShare is just monitoring the total energy demand of everything behind that meter. So if you, for example, are charging your EV and your EV is connected behind your own meter, which is relatively rare in apartments, usually there's the demand management piece in larger apartments, but if it is, say, behind your own meter, you can charge your car with, say, your shared solar. The electrons coming from that.
But you talk about going back the other way, using your car battery.
Yeah.
So vehicle to load is like a concept that's coming through where, you use your car battery as effectively as like your power wall, effectively. But yeah, I don't think you'd want to be pumping that back into a communal system because otherwise it'd be being spread out amongst everyone in the apartment. Yeah. If you had that set up, if you wanted to achieve that, you'd want to be working with your OC to get that so that comes back in behind your own meter. So it would kind of work alongside the Illum, but not back into the Illum, if that makes sense. So your meter would have solar coming into it, but it would also have your battery coming in as a separate system. I don't think you'd want to connect your personal vehicle back into a community system.
Yeah, so just, you'd be able to charge your vehicle via SolShare. but it is one directional in that point of view. So then, if you have the ability from a regulatory perspective to use your car to run your home, you could do that as long as it's cabled accordingly. I guess on the battery side of things, you can connect shared batteries and sole share as well, but we don't see it very often because you need to get the 12, 24 months of data and size that accordingly. You can have a shared community battery associated with that as well, but we don't see it very often yet.
And the 26 kilowatt, that's a hard limit as well.
So per sole share box, you can connect up to 22 kilowatts AC, so that's inverter capacity. And then there's a 30% increase rule on the amount of solar panels you can connect to that inverter. But for basically, based on the products available to market, a typical sole share system will have up to 26 kilowatts of solar connected, or 26.6, with a 20 kilowatt inverter for up to 15 tenancies. So if we had, say, 20 apartments, you could have, you'd have 2 sole shares, each with 10 apartments. You could have up to 52 kilowatts. But it is really important that it's sort of the education around the amount of solar that's relevant for that building is communicated correctly, because especially with shared solar, it's very different to standard solar because of the sharing capabilities of it and the increase in self-consumption. So say a 1 kilowatt of individual system to a 1 kilowatt of shared system, they don't give the same financial impacts. So because of the shared system, you can access up to 3 kilowatts, for example, at one point in time. There's a much better self-consumption percentage and increased, saving from this same amount of panels on a per residency basis. But I can always speak through that in a bit more detail, just with a bit more time.
Thank you.
Sorry, behind you was just a squeak ahead, so I'm just going like this.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. That's on.
My questions, I've got a number of questions. We live in a block of 4 apartments. Now, just looking today, we'd be excluded. Why is this? And the next question is about the panels. What's the life expectancy of a panel, or panels, and the maintenance required? I managed property before I retired, and we had solar panels installed, 12 I think, no more, installed in one of our houses, and we were told that it had to be maintained every year, and the joint between the panels, I forget what it's called, the joint between the panels often broke away and water just spurted all over the place. We had to get all sorts of people in to replace it, I think, replace the connection. And yes, it was hot. It was hot water, sorry, they weren't solar panels, they were hot water panels. And the life, they were the 3 questions. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Well, I can start off with lifespan of hardware. So solar panels, they typically got like a manufacturer's warranty, i.e. like if it works or not, for somewhere between 10 and 12 years. That's pretty standard for panels. They've also usually got a performance warranty on them, because solar panels slightly degrade over time. They lose efficiency of a couple of percent in the first couple of years. Dan probably knows the answer to this a bit better than me. A couple of percent in the first, and then it drops off like 1%. Or 0.5% per year from that point onwards. So you normally find at the end of 25 years, your panels should be somewhere between 85 and 90% as efficient as they are when they were stuck in. So like you'll have, it's pretty standard to have a 25-year performance warranty on your panels as well. With regards to what you need to do to your panels, like a solar system is a static system. There's no moving parts in it. So there's not a huge amount of stuff you have to do. We recommend that you wipe them down every 12 months. I was standing on a roof today of some apartments, which is 5 years old, and I could run my finger across it and it comes away all brown and dirty. Like that just affects the efficiency of the panels, so that's probably about the only thing you really need to do. If your panel starts leaking water, yep, you're right, that's not a solar PV, that's a hot water one, so don't worry about that too much. And then with regards to the funding, yeah, look, the funding is set by SolarVic, so yeah, unfortunately, none of us free sitting here have any control over how the government's decided to allocate that money. They've just put a cut-off point between 5 and 50. We don't know if that's going to change when the funding comes out at the end for round 2. Again, if you want to grab my details or flip me a message, I can at least update you when the funding comes out to see if buildings 4 and less have been included.
There's probably not many now being built that way.
A few coming through. I got a lot of questions from developers, I must say, for the 4. I mean, to give some context, I guess additionally, you still have your standard $1,400 up to $1,400 rebate with Solar Victoria for the ones that are 4 or less. That $1,400 is the same with the solar for apartments, but it's co-funded federally. So that's how it comes to $2,800. And the reason that the federal government has done that through a program called Community Solar Banks is to sort of activate the strata and owners corporation market to build up the industry. So that's why we don't know whether the full $2,800 will be along for much longer, but we assume that the $1,400 solar VIC will remain standard throughout that for the foreseeable future.
Did you have a question? Yes.
I think just to cover on maintenance as well, I guess my background, having been in the commercial space, I think the only other thing to add is, a system check is, quite important to make sure it's all nice and safe for anyone that's up on the roof checking things. I guess from a soul share perspective, I always get this question every Q&A I do with an owners committee or broader residents. Soul share itself doesn't require maintenance, but you still get your panels, your inverter, just for your system checks. But it is only a singular system that you are getting checked. So it's just that consideration to think about maintenance funds going forward and how that impacts your strata fees. But generally, common area savings, which common area is usually included with every soul share install as well, not just the apartments, significantly offsets or outweighs the cost of maintenance as well.
Yes, I've got a question. That our apartment is apartment building is an embedded network. I'm not aware there's any technical reason why an Loom system couldn't work, but just out of curiosity, of course the government can make whatever rules it likes, but are you aware of what the rationale was as to why they excluded embedded networks?
So an embedded network is privately owned and operated by your the embedded network is owned by the OC, but it is operated by a third party, a private business. So the idea that the government would be chipping in some solar to be connected into that network to increase their profitability of the network is probably the reason behind why it's not being included.
Yeah, it can be very much complementary. We are installed on very much a growing number of embedded networks. There's a different value add. A lot of them are new builds, just because the developer is the one that makes that decision, rather than having to get permission from your embedded network operator. So that's where we get integrated behind the sub-meter. So what that means is the solar ownership actually sits with the owners corporation, and the full benefit of the solar goes to the residents. Traditionally with embedded networks, the solar only goes to the common area, or it goes just to the embedded network, and the embedded network sells that energy at whatever rate they provide. There's a few different setups that they can do. The only thing with an embedded network is they're not legally required to provide a feed-in tariff for any excess solar that you might not self-consume with a solar share system. But it is very much complementary in a way.
Yeah, and having worked in the embedded network space myself, the time for you to be putting solar into your embedded network is when that contract expires. So make sure you're across your contract. There'll be a 6-month period before it expires. If you don't catch it right, it'll auto roll for another 5 years on your current terms. Make sure that you are well across when that is, and read those terms very, very carefully. There's lots of very dubious wording that goes in those contracts, but that is the point. If you pause your contract at that point, you then take it out to tender. You can put in the tender and say, look, we want this amount of solar put in, we want this soul share put in, whatever it happens to be, that is the time that you squeeze it in.
I was wondering if there was any, I heard before that they were talking about expanding solar, but if you have a lot of solar, it affects the network, when the sun shines, it produces a lot, and then cloud comes over and nothing, and it destabilizes the grid. I don't hear about that anymore. Is that still a concept, or?
Yeah, it's with resident. I guess it's DER, so distributed energy resources, which is solar systems installed in standalone homes or small buildings. In comparison to, say, solar farms. So it's a much larger issue on a solar farm perspective. But what we're seeing within, say, Melbourne and Victoria is there are different initiatives being, implemented by the people that own the poles and wires, DNSP, City Power, Powercore, to mitigate that impact. So usually there's something that's being implemented called a backstop mechanism. All that means is they put in, a backstop mechanism to help protect the network where maybe there's too much solar in the network and no one's consuming enough of that solar, or there's not enough energy being provided to the network. And that's where sort of batteries take a big influence in the network as well. There's a lot of, profiteering that you can do with those. But that's something that's just managed by the DNSPs and the broader government that we find. And then you'll hear about it a little bit. I myself used to live in Adelaide. It's a much bigger issue in South Australia because we ship in all of our energy from, the rest of the country through the interconnector, and we very much highly rely on solar panels. In Victoria, it's a much less of an issue.
I've got a question here.
Just here. You mentioned that you were lucky in your team to have a sustainability member or somebody who had a background in that.
Yeah.
Is there a requirement for Strata, maybe at some point, to be well versed in this area? Is there?
No, and I think that's, like I said, my company set up a sustainability department because the company owner believes in it and he thinks it's a good thing to do, and it's the route that he wants us to be taking. Because in reality, like a strata manager looks after your buildings, they are paid to keep your lights on. They are organisers. They are organising the wall to be painted, the roof to be fixed. Someone keeps emptying a bag of rubbish on the lawn every Wednesday, they've got to sort that problem out. Like, they're sorting out all sorts of problems. So expect that community manager to also be an electrical engineer, to be able to go out, get 3 tenders for the solar, analyse which one's best, and then advise the committee, this is the route you've got to go down. It's a bridge too far. Like, it's just something that's not within their standard skill set. So it's not a requirement, but I would imagine it's going to be a question that's posed to more and more strata companies, and they're all going to start thinking about how they're going to address this issue moving forward.
Yeah, I can comment, sorry, can I just comment on that one too? The legislation, I can't give you the exact wording, but the legislation, you might remember this too, has been amended, I think recently, so that an owners corporation can't refuse sustainability measures. Correct. Just on, say, cosmetic grounds. Yeah. They can't say, no, you can't have solar panels, it will spoil the look of the building or something. So, the specific detail I can't go into, but there is certainly the government and the legislation. They're trying to get a situation whereby if people living in there, people who are owners, ask about sustainability, it can't be knocked back by the committee just on the grounds that, we don't like that, or that's not, frivolous ground. The other thing is that they are also trying to, I think with this grant particularly, they have tried to introduce some measures so that tenants can have a bit of a say, but they're only a first step, I think. We didn't actually talk to the tenants in our case because most of the owners are in favour anyway, so it didn't become an issue. But tenants can express views. I think the thing that might hold them back would be that they're scared of alienating their owners and so on. But so there are the government is definitely interested in introducing some measures to ensure that sustainability isn't just dismissed out of hand, that it has to be considered by the owners corporation and presumably by the management services too. And ours is associated with what Dan's talking about, so they do. But I think that all of them need to start taking it seriously and listening to people when they ask about sustainability. At least that's the first step.
Hi, thanks for your presentations. Given the demand and interest in solar for apartments, are you confident that there might be a round 3 of the solar for apartments rebate in Victoria sometime next year, so we've still got the same government power. And second question is, have you noticed in owners corporations that have put on solar that they're now using more programmable or delay start appliances to take advantage of the solar curve through during the day?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. Look, it's what we're finding when people are putting solar in, and when we model stuff on a current energy usage standard profile. But yeah, as soon as people start putting solar in, it's almost like it's like a game. How much can you game the system? How much can you get of this free solar into your electrical appliances as quick as possible? So yeah, we do see a change in energy usage. Like we're just doing our renovation at the moment at home, and we're making sure that all of our kitchen appliances have got timers, and preferably timers that we can connect to via our phones, so that we can be flicking them on and off as and when the solar's flowing back out of our house and into the grid. To try and stop that as much as possible. So yeah, like it's just something that we just intrinsically see happening with all solar installations. The first question to do with the funding, I mean, trying to ask someone who's, even when they work within the government organisation, what they're going to do in round 3 is like a pretty impossible question. But what we understand so far with Solar Vic is that the second round of funding is going to be available until the end of 2025. And then after that, it could get sucked back into the pot and then redistributed amongst other government organisations. There is another second school of thought, though, that it could just kind of sit there in perpetuity and be used. But that's a very tricky question for any of us free to answer, to be fair.
Just to add on that as well, we've been working with, I work very closely with social housing as well. So we support a lot of multi-residential social housing assets with behind-the-meter solar to keep that freedom of choice with those retailers, or freedom of choice of retailers with the tenants. We worked with Homes New South Wales on a couple of new build projects where they've got timers for their hot waters, electric hot water services, which has been really exciting. So basically having sole share and then spreading out when those water tanks are heating up. And it's a new build project, so it hasn't been finished yet. But the first one of those is quite exciting to see. So hopefully we get some really good data out there and shared with the broader community. But it's good to see government, state government doing that as well.
I suppose just from a personal perspective, and it would be the same if you're in a house or an apartment, I think, that personal perspective, you do start thinking about and thinking, when am I using it? And particularly since I've retired, I'm able to do that. When am I going to do things? But just a funny little story. My apartment is tenanted at the moment to an international student who hadn't much familiarity with this kind of thing. And for me to say to her, you should be running the heater in winter when the sun is shining, was quite counterintuitive. So it seems that you really have to think about and sort of think through that, do those things when the sun's shining, even if it seems like that's when you don't need it, kind of thing.
Okay, thanks. With the grants, how far along in your preparation do you need to apply for a grant? In the sense, do you have to have the OC having already agreed to it, or can you get it prior to that, in a sense?
The rules are going to change, we think, for this second round. What they're telling us is that they are going to give us the ability to be able to check if your building is eligible up front. So we're going to be able to do an eligibility. We're going to do that test first, which wasn't how was it for round 1, but we'll be able to do that up front, and then what we understand is going to happen, and look, it's not been final, it's not been announced, but I've had frequent chats with Old Solar Vic. What they're telling us is that you're then going to have to go through the entire process, get the vote signed off, and then you hand that in, and away you go. So so if you are contemplating doing the apartments, the message is get on with it, get it moving, get it squeezed through as far as you can, and then once you get to that voting process and the vote goes through, hopefully in your favour, that's when you put the application in and the money gets allocated to you.
Can I just ask, are you on the committee of the Owners Corporation or anything?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So that's where I started to, being on the committee of the Owners Corporation. And the main thing, we did just informal investigations because of the requirement of at least 5. We asked around, be sure that we could have at least 5 people who are interested, and sort of went on from there. So that was how we started off.
Yeah, I suppose that your point that, you know, looking at it from the perspective that if you can make it revenue neutral for some people, you know, where there's the sort of halfway split of either tenants or new owners who are actually got horrible mortgage problems at the moment, is a very interesting one, although you've still got the problem of a 1970s apartment block. So I presume it's a $25,000 starting point of upgrading.
No, not in the case of this system where it goes into the individual apartments. That is, your internal meter might need upgrading, but there was a grant for that, which covers at least part of the cost, and it's not nearly such a big cost. It's, I think, in the system where it's the shared system where your whole meter board needs to be upgraded is more expensive. But upgrading the internal meter board for the individual, I don't know if you want Dan to expand on that at all.
Yeah, look, we quoted over 100 apartment buildings in round 1. Out of those, it's less than 5 that needed overall switchboard upgrades, and most of them were pretty well aware that they'd had works that needed to be done, and they'd been aware of it for some time. So they sort of took this as an opportunity to do the work that they've been needing to. Yeah, in most cases, because we're going directly into each apartment switchboard, yeah, massive works aren't really required.
Fantastic. Oh, look, we're just running out of time, and Dan has got to race out of here to get to his futsal game. He is a champion player.
I'm not sure I go that far, but
on time. So we've got time for one more.
Sure, let's do one more question.
Quick question.
Yeah, just supplementary to the issue with power boards. Our building's nearing 60 years of age, and I've got no doubt we need a main switchboard upgrade. I don't know how many of the individual apartments have had their power panels upgraded recently.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be an additional cost to apartment owner or unit owners over and above?
The individual panel, yes. So normally the OC is responsible for the main panel and any sort of like main switchboard, and then what that trickles into your actual apartments. Like once the bits in your apartment, that's typically the owner that pays for that.
Yeah.
It's a larger piece though. Like it's not just upgrading the panel in your own apartment, but it's quite often it's the connection from that point back to the meter panel, which needs some additional work to as well. So it can be a bit of a can of worms, but yeah, an electrician should be able to help you with that process. And you know, like all of the solar installers should have someone who can help you along that path. So yeah, not easy, but it's definitely doable.
That's the point that we were making before, that it is going into, if you have the individual one going in directly to your unit, as I have, that the upgrading is not usually, as Dan said, in some cases it is, but not usually such a big issue. Some upgrade may be required, but I think there is still a government grant for that, and it's not such a big expense.
We also do the same thing into the individual apartments. We're required to avoid the same thing. However, I guess the average install size that we work with, although we work with anything from 5 to 100 plus apartments, the average is usually around 20 apartments. So when we kind of get to that level, the cost of cabling in that scenario, it just weighs out that you're better off doing switchboard upgrade in that scenario. And then that'll cover off getting shared hot water heat pump for the building, or EVs in future, or batteries, etc., which would be required as a base case anyway.
And quickly, just putting on my strata hat for one last point, you should be looking at having some sort of like maintenance budget in place. And if you put main switchboard upgrade as one of those items on your budget, it means that when you need to do it, you can use it for your maintenance budget. You can use your maintenance budget for it. That's a really important point. Put it on, and then you'll be able to use the funds that you're collecting for cutting the grass, painting the building, changing the roof, doing your main switchboard.
Yeah. Gotcha. I agree that we, even though you may not have to do it when you're having to solve the individual apartments, overall it is something that we in our 1960s block know that we have to look at. It will be something that we have to look at eventually, getting that main switchboard upgraded.
All right, well, we might draw the session to a close and just say a huge thank you to our speakers. They've just been fantastic, inspirational sources of information. And thanks for your attendance and your engagement and your great questions. So thanks everyone. We'll call the session.